Little black boy tells the judge, "I'm my mom's lawyer." Then something unbelievable happened. Before we dive into the story, please hit the subscribe button. Also, drop a comment and let us know which city you're watching from. We love hearing where our community is tuning in from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The words echoed through the courtroom like thunder on a clear summer day, causing Judge Martinez to stop shuffling through his papers and peer over his wire-rimmed glasses. Marcus Williams was only 9 years old, but his voice sliced through the formal silence of the family courtroom with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He stood beside his mother, Angela, who gazed at him with a cocktail of pride and sheer terror swirling in her dark eyes. Across the mahogany-paneled room, his biological father, Jonathan Sterling III, nearly spilled his expensive imported coffee all over his $1,000 Italian suit. "I'm sorry, young man," Judge Martinez said, his voice strained with forced patience as he studied the thin boy with thick-rimmed glasses who had dared to interrupt a multi-million-dollar custody battle. "But this is a legal proceeding between adults." "I understand, Your Honor," Marcus replied, his small hands adjusting his glasses with a confidence that made several adults in the room shift uncomfortably in their leather chairs. "I also understand that according to Article 12 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which was ratified by the United States, I have the fundamental right to express my views on all matters that directly affect my life."
He opened a worn spiral notebook, filled with careful handwriting. "And this case most definitely affects my life." The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear the ancient heating system humming through the courthouse walls. Jonathan
Sterling, Chicago's most ruthless real estate tycoon, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than Angela earned in 8 months, shot his team of high-priced attorneys a look that could have melted steel. None of them had prepared for this scenario, facing a child who quoted international law with the precision of a seasoned legal scholar. Angela Williams worked 70 hours a week as a certified nursing assistant, her hands permanently stained, with the antiseptic smell of the hospital, struggling to raise Marcus alone on her modest salary. In the 9 years since Jonathan had discovered he was a father, he had graced his son's life with his presence exactly 4 times, always bearing expensive gifts wrapped in empty promises. Now, suddenly, he wanted complete custody. "Your Honor," Dr. Harrison, Jonathan's lead attorney, interrupted, straightening his silk tie with nervous fingers. "This is highly irregular. The child lacks the legal capacity to what?" Marcus interrupted, with a calmness that made several adults in the room exchange worried glances. "To think? To observe? To remember?" His young voice carried a weight. That seemed impossible for someone who still needed a step stool to reach the kitchen sink. "And if you genuinely cared about my well-being, you would want to hear what I have to say instead of trying to silence me like I'm some inconvenience." Jonathan leaned forward to whisper something urgent in Dr. Harrison's ear, but Marcus continued, opening his notebook with the methodical precision of a chess master making his opening move. "Your Honor, I have prepared a comprehensive, documented presentation on why I should remain with my mother, including irrefutable evidence of the petitioner's true motives." He paused, his intelligent brown eyes meeting Jonathan's cold gray ones for the first time since entering the courtroom. "Motives that I believe this court will find extremely enlightening." Jonathan Sterling's face drained of color like water, running out of a bathtub. What exactly had this 9-year-old boy uncovered? And how had a child managed to prepare more thoroughly for this hearing than he and his team of millionaire lawyers? In that silent courtroom, everyone was witnessing something extraordinary. A boy who possessed secrets capable of toppling empires built on deception and greed. Dr. Harrison quickly regained his professional composure, the way only a lawyer with 30 years of experience could. "Your Honor, while we certainly admire the child's creativity, this courtroom deals with complex family law matters that require proper legal representation." "Then why didn't you provide any for him?" Marcus asked, closing his notebook with a sharp snap that reverberated through the hushed room like a gunshot. In the past 10 months of this case, no one thought it was important to hear the opinion of the person most affected by this decision. Jonathan. Sterling shifted in his chair like a man sitting on burning coals. There was something about the boy's unnatural calm that disturbed him deeply. Marcus didn't seem even slightly intimidated by the formal surroundings, the expensive lawyers, or the imposing presence of the biological father who was essentially a stranger. Angela watched her son with a mixture of overwhelming pride and barely controlled panic. For weeks, Marcus had been coming home from school with strange books tucked under his arm. Legal codes, children's rights manuals, court precedent studies. She had assumed it was just intellectual curiosity from her brilliant child. She never imagined he was preparing for war. "Your Honor," Dr. Harrison continued, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "My client, Mr. Sterling, is seeking custody because he is genuinely concerned about his son's welfare. Ms. Williams, while undoubtedly well-intentioned, simply lacks the financial resources to provide the educational and social opportunities that a gifted child like Marcus deserves." "Interesting," Marcus murmured, reopening his notebook with deliberate slowness. Genuine concern. He flipped through several pages covered in his careful handwriting. "Your Honor, may I share some documented facts about this so-called genuine concern?" Judge Martinez, who had presided over thousands of custody cases in his distinguished career, had never encountered anything remotely like this situation. On one hand, he had strict legal protocols to follow. On the other hand, this child displayed an articulation and preparation that surpassed most law school graduates. "Marcus," Angela whispered softly, her voice trembling with maternal worry. "Maybe we should let the lawyers handle—" "What lawyers, Mom?" Marcus interrupted her gently, his voice filled with a tenderness that broke her heart. "We can't afford to hire Dr. Harrison or his colleagues, so either I speak for us or no one speaks for us at all." Jonathan Sterling finally found his voice, though it came out strained and uncertain. "Marcus, son, I know this situation must be confusing for you, but don't call me son." The words emerged with a coldness that sent chills down several spines. In the courtroom. "In the 9 years of my life, you've appeared exactly 4 times. Twice on birthdays, always 3 weeks late because you forgot. Once at Christmas, when you had exactly 20 minutes between your social engagements. And once when the local newspaper was doing a feature story on philanthropic entrepreneurs, and you needed a photo opportunity with a child." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of traffic outside. Jonathan opened his mouth to protest, but Marcus continued with relentless precision. "The last time we met, 6 months ago, you spent exactly 15 minutes in our apartment, just long enough to criticize our second-hand furniture, complain about the hospital smell my mother brings home on her scrubs, and suggest that I might have potential if I received a proper education." Marcus adjusted his glasses, a gesture that was becoming his signature in this courtroom. "Interestingly, 2 weeks after that visit you filed for custody." Dr. Harrison whispered something urgent in Jonathan's ear, but the boy wasn't finished building his case. "Your Honor, I've conducted extensive research on my biological father. I discovered that he recently lost a very expensive lawsuit against his former business partners. I discovered that his third wife has filed for divorce, a contested one citing financial deception. And I discovered something particularly fascinating about a trust fund established by my late paternal grandmother." Jonathan Sterling's face transformed from pale to ghostly white in a matter of seconds. How, in the name of all that was holy, had this 9-year-old child uncovered information that some of his own lawyers didn't possess? Marcus turned a page in his notebook and smiled, for the first time since entering the courtroom. It wasn't the innocent smile of a child discovering ice cream. It was the calculated smile of someone holding a royal flush and preparing to play their hand. "But before we discuss inheritances and financial motivations," Marcus said, closing his notebook with theatrical precision, "perhaps we should explore why a man who never demonstrated any genuine interest in fatherhood suddenly developed such an overwhelming paternal instinct Jonathan Sterling was now visibly perspiring despite the courthouse's efficient air conditioning, and his team of expensive lawyers looked completely lost at sea. None of them had prepared to face a child who apparently possessed more knowledge about their client's financial situation than they did. What exactly had this 9-year-old boy discovered during his mysterious afternoons at the library? And how had a child managed to gather intelligence that adults with unlimited resources and professional investigators had failed to obtain? Judge Martinez leaned forward in his chair, his judicial curiosity clearly piqued. In 3 decades on, the bench, he had never witnessed such an articulate child in his courtroom. Marcus, you mentioned evidence. What kind of evidence could a 9-year-old possibly have gathered? Marcus adjusted his glasses again, the gesture that was rapidly becoming his trademark. Your Honor, for the past 3 months, ever since I learned about this lawsuit, I have dedicated every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon to conducting research at the Central Public Library. Researching what? Dr. Harrison interrupted with barely concealed condescension. Public records, newspaper archives, available corporate documents, and Mr. Sterling's previous court cases. Marcus opened a new section of his notebook with the efficiency of a seasoned lawyer. The head librarian, Ms. Rodriguez, holds a master's degree in information science. She taught me how to access basic legal databases and public records. Angela stared at her son in complete amazement. For months, Marcus had told her he was working on a special research project at the library. She never imagined the project was designed to save their family. Jonathan Sterling finally exploded, his carefully maintained composure shattering like glass. This is absolutely ridiculous. A 9-year-old boy investigating my private affairs like some kind of amateur detective. Public information, sir, Marcus corrected with infuriating calm. All perfectly legal and accessible to any American citizen, regardless of age. Before going deeper into the story, if you are enjoying the story, please hit the subscribe button. Ms. Rodriguez had indeed become much more than a librarian to Marcus. When he first appeared, asking detailed questions about how family courts operated, she quickly realized this wasn't academic curiosity. It was desperation disguised as determination. That boy has been coming here religiously for 3 months, she had told Angela the previous week when she finally called, concerned about Marcus's intense research sessions. He reads legal codes the way other children read comic books. He's learning at a pace that's almost frightening. Marcus continued his methodical presentation. I've discovered that in the past 18 months, Mr. Sterling has faced 4 significant lawsuits. He lost a $2.8 million dispute with former partners in Sterling Industries. His current wife, his third, has filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, which is legal code for he hid substantial assets from me. Jonathan's face flushed red with fury. How dare you? And most interestingly, Marcus interrupted, turning pages with surgical precision. I discovered that my late paternal grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, established a trust fund of $1.9 million specifically for my care and education, accessible only when I reach 18 years of age or when my biological father obtains full legal custody of me. The silence in the courtroom was so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Dr. Harrison whispered something desperate in Jonathan's ear, but Jonathan was too stunned to respond coherently. Your Honor, this timing is no coincidence, Marcus continued, his young voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. My grandmother passed away when I was 2 years old. For 7 years, Mr. Sterling never mentioned my existence to her, never brought me to meet her, never allowed her to know she had a grandson. Angela remembered those years perfectly. Jonathan had been categorical in his instructions. My family doesn't need to know about complications, referring to his own flesh and blood as a complication. But when Mrs. Eleanor Sterling discovered my existence through her own private investigation, something I found documented in the estate records, she immediately established the fund with one very specific condition. Marcus paused dramatically, knowing that every person in the room was hanging on his every word. The money would be released for my care and education only if my father demonstrated genuine commitment to my welfare by obtaining legal custody. If he never sought custody, the money would transfer directly to me at 18 with absolutely no parental access. The mathematics were elegantly simple and devastatingly cruel. Jonathan had ignored Marcus for 9 years, missing his opportunity to access the inheritance through natural custody. Now, financially ruined and desperate, he was attempting to force late custody to access the funds that could solve all his problems. "But there's something my grandmother couldn't have foreseen," Marcus said, closing his notebook with a finality that felt like a judge's gavel. "She didn't know her son would develop a career destroying small family businesses through predatory practices." Dr. Harrison shot to his feet like a rocket. "Your Honor, this is spiraling completely out of control. The child is making baseless accusations without any—" "I can prove every single word I'm saying," Marcus interrupted, reaching into his school backpack and retrieving a surprisingly well-organized manila folder. "I have here copies of 19 lawsuits over the past 6 years where Sterling Industries purchased properties from financially distressed families for well below market value, using insider information obtained through contacts at local banks." Angela watched in stunned silence as her 9-year-old son transformed a custody hearing into an impromptu criminal investigation, using nothing but a public library and relentless determination. "One of these families," Marcus continued, pulling printed photographs from his folder, "owned a small restaurant. The Gonzalez family, hard-working immigrants who invested their life savings into their dream. Mr. Sterling discovered through his banking contacts that they were 4 months behind on their loan due to the emergency surgery costs for their daughter's appendicitis. Jonathan Sterling was now perspiring so heavily that his expensive shirt was visibly damp. "This has absolutely nothing to do with—" "It has everything to do with this case," Marcus interrupted with the confidence of a seasoned prosecutor, "because it establishes a clear pattern of behavior. A man who preys on vulnerable families for financial gain is now attempting to prey on his own vulnerable family for exactly the same reason." Judge Martinez examined the documents Marcus had presented, his expression growing increasingly grave with each page. "Where exactly did you obtain this information, Marcus?" "Public court records, local newspaper archives, and incorporation documents available through the state database." Marcus listed each source with methodical precision. "Ms. Rodriguez taught me that the truth is almost always publicly available. We just have to know where to look and how to connect the pieces." Dr. Harrison attempted one final desperate maneuver. "Your Honor, even if these allegations contained some grain of truth, which we are absolutely not admitting, they don't change the fundamental fact that my client can provide superior educational opportunities for this child." Marcus smiled. Not the innocent smile of childhood, but the calculated expression of someone who had saved their most devastating evidence for the final moment. "Speaking of education," he said, opening the last section of his notebook with the precision of a surgeon making a critical incision, "may I share something particularly enlightening about Mr. Sterling's actual educational plans for me?" It was at that moment that Jonathan Sterling fully comprehended the magnitude of his miscalculation. His 9-year-old son wasn't just intelligent, he was strategically brilliant, and he had uncovered secrets that even Jonathan's own high-priced legal team didn't know existed. What exactly had Marcus discovered about Jonathan's true intentions for his education? And how had a child managed to construct a more compelling legal case than millionaire lawyers using only a public library and the guidance of a dedicated librarian? In the hushed courtroom, everyone waited for the final revelation that promised to be even more devastating than everything they had already witnessed. "Regarding education," Marcus repeated, opening the final section of his notebook with surgical precision, "I'd like to share Mr. Sterling's genuine educational plans for my future." Jonathan Sterling swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically, between his lawyer and the boy who had transformed into his worst nightmare. "During one of his 4 visits to me over the past 9 years, Marcus continued methodically, I overheard a very revealing phone conversation. Mr. Sterling was discussing how to solve the child problem once he obtained custody. Dr. Harrison leaped to his feet like his chair had caught fire. Your Honor, private conversations cannot possibly be. I can document every word, Marcus interrupted, producing a small digital recorder from his backpack. Ms. Rodriguez taught me that evidence documentation is fundamental to any legitimate legal case. The silence that followed was so profound, it felt like the entire courthouse had been emptied of air. Jonathan Sterling was now shaking visibly, his manicured fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the polished table as he realized he had catastrophically underestimated his own son's intelligence and determination. This recording was made during his most recent visit to our apartment 6 months ago, Marcus explained calmly to Judge Martinez. Mr. Sterling assumed I was completing homework in my bedroom, but I had left the recorder running in our living room. Judge Martinez picked up the device and examined it carefully. Marcus, are you absolutely certain you want to present this as evidence? Completely certain, Your Honor. The sound of the recording filled the silent courtroom like poison, spreading through clean water. Jonathan Sterling's unmistakable voice spoke clearly into his phone. Listen carefully. As soon as I secure legal custody, the boy goes directly to Riverside Military Academy. It's a strict boarding institution in Colorado. They specialize in handling difficult children. He'll remain there until he turns 18. And I'll have complete access to the inheritance funds for so-called educational expenses. The other person's voice was inaudible, but Jonathan continued with chilling clarity. Exactly. $500 monthly for boarding costs. The remaining funds are mine to manage. The child doesn't need to know about the money's existence. It's the perfect solution. She's eliminated from the picture. I have access to the funds, and I still appear to be a responsible father. Angela covered her face with trembling hands, tears streaming through her fingers. She had never known Jonathan had planned to dispose of Marcus so callously, like unwanted furniture. Dr. Harrison appeared physically ill, realizing that his client had just destroyed himself with his own recorded words. There's additional material, Marcus said with devastating calm, pausing the recording. This section reveals what he truly thinks of me as a person. The second portion of the recording was even more crushing. The real problem isn't just accessing the money. It's that this boy is too intelligent for his own good. He asks constant questions, observes everything, remembers details. It would be best to keep him completely isolated until he turns 18, and I can resolve the financial situation permanently. Children like him, well, you understand. We can't have him developing ideas above his station. Jonathan Sterling exploded from his chair. This is entrapment! He deliberately provoked me! A 9-year-old child cannot possibly— Cannot what? Marcus interrupted, his voice slicing through Jonathan's hysteria like a blade through silk. Cannot be intelligent? Cannot defend himself? Cannot expose the truth about a father who views him as a problem requiring a solution? Judge Martinez turned off the recorder and fixed Jonathan Sterling with a stare that could have frozen hellfire. Mr. Sterling, this recording, combined with the extensive financial evidence presented, paints an absolutely clear picture of your true motivations. Your Honor, Marcus continued, I have also researched Riverside Military Academy thoroughly. In the past 5 years, 4 students have committed suicide there. The institution is currently under federal investigation for systematic physical and emotional abuse of minors. Dr. Harrison attempted one final desperate card. Your Honor, even considering these serious allegations, the fact remains that my client possesses superior financial resources to accomplish what? Marcus interrupted. To send me to a place where children die? To steal my inheritance while pretending to care about my welfare? To separate me from the only person who has ever truly loved me? Jonathan Sterling completely lost his remaining composure. You're nothing but an arrogant child who doesn't understand his place in this world, and you're a stranger who happens to share my DNA, Marcus replied with a calmness that sent chills through every person in the room. A real father wouldn't attempt to destroy his own son to steal money. Judge Martinez banged his gavel with authority. "Mr. Sterling, sit down immediately, or you will be forcibly removed from my courtroom." Marcus turned to the final page of his notebook. "Your Honor, there is one last matter I need to address. Something I discovered about why my grandmother truly established that trust fund. If possible, Jonathan Sterling turned even paler. I located a sealed letter from her in the estate files. A letter addressed to me, intended to be opened when I turned 16. Marcus took a deep breath, his composure never wavering. However, the librarian helped me discover that I could request early access in cases involving custody disputes. The final revelation was about to detonate. My grandmother wrote that she knew Jonathan was never a real father, that she established the trust specifically to protect me from his influence, and that if he ever attempted to gain custody purely for financial reasons, I should use every available resource within the trust to defend myself legally. Marcus closed his notebook and looked directly at Jonathan Sterling with eyes far too old for his young face. She even hired private investigators, who documented all of his financial schemes over the years. Everything is archived with the fund's administrator. Jonathan Sterling collapsed back into his chair like a man who had just been shot, finally understanding that he had been completely outmaneuvered by the 9-year-old he had dismissed as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle. Judge Martinez struck his gavel with finality. Based on all evidence presented, including financial documents, recorded admissions, and the plaintiff's documented history of predatory behavior, the custody request is categorically denied. Furthermore, I am ordering a complete investigation into possible fraudulent manipulation of trust fund assets, Dr. Harrison whispered urgently to Jonathan, but it was obvious the case was irretrievably lost. Marcus methodically packed away his materials, displaying the same remarkable calm he had maintained throughout the entire hearing. "Your Honor, may I make one final request?" "You may, Marcus." "I would like Mr. Sterling to understand that I didn't do this out of anger or desire for revenge. I did it because every child deserves to have a family that truly loves them, not one that views them as a financial opportunity to be exploited." As Jonathan Sterling was escorted from the room by security guards, the judge had ordered his immediate arrest for attempted fraud, Marcus finally allowed a small, genuine smile to appear on his young face. In that silent courtroom, a 9-year-old child had just proven that intelligence, preparation, and authentic love could defeat any amount of money, privilege, and corruption. But Marcus's victory represented something far greater than a simple custody battle. It was the beginning of a transformation that would change countless lives forever. 3 years after his historic day in court, Marcus Williams's life was transformed. The video of him defending his mother didn't just win the case, it went viral, turning him into a symbol for a generation of children refusing to accept injustice silently. The video accumulated over 60 million views and inspired legislative changes in 23 states. Today, we welcome 12-year-old Marcus Williams, announced the host of a top-rated morning show. How does it feel to be called the smartest kid in America? Marcus, now taller with updated glasses, smiled warmly. I'd prefer to just be called Marcus, someone who learned that every child has a voice, even when adults pretend they can't hear it. His mother, Angela, watched from backstage, now a nursing supervisor. Her hospital had even created a scholarship in her name. "What makes me proudest isn't his intelligence. It's his heart," she said on stage. He could have used his story for personal gain, but he chose to help other families instead. It was true. Marcus had spent 3 years visiting schools in underserved communities. His bestseller, Every Child Has a Voice, funded free legal aid for families. He had also created the Kids Law Library, a project that put legal resources in simple language into 1,500 public libraries nationwide. Meanwhile, Jonathan Sterling watched the broadcast from his small studio apartment. His company, mansion, and reputation were gone, destroyed by the financial schemes revealed during the court-ordered investigation. He had served 2 years in prison. The most painful part was that Marcus never spoke negatively about him. "I
hope he finds peace," Marcus had once said, showing a maturity that underscored Jonathan's failure. Back in the studio, the host asked for his final advice. "You are never alone," Marcus said, looking directly into the camera. "You possess more
power than you realize, and truth always finds a way to triumph," he added. "Never let anyone convince you that you're too small to create change." Months later, Marcus received a letter from an 11-year-old girl named Isabella, who had used his project to save her grandfather from an illegal eviction. "Thank you for teaching me that every child has a voice," she wrote. Angela found Marcus reading the letter. "If Jonathan Sterling had never tried to tear our family apart," he explained, "I would never have discovered that a child can change the world." When adults stop underestimating them, that same day, Harvard offered him a full scholarship. Marcus accepted on one condition: "I want to create a legal system that truly protects all children." At 16, he became the youngest lawyer ever admitted to the bar, and his first case was a successful lawsuit to make legal education a mandatory part of public school curriculum. Jonathan never fully recovered from his downfall. In his rare, honest moments, he knew Marcus had become the man he never had the character to be. Marcus's story proved that true strength comes from intelligence, courage, and unconditional love. A 9-year-old boy had defeated a corrupt system, using only a public library, unwavering determination, and the power of truth.